Well, let's talk a little bit about the difference between automation and AI.
The automation that I was talking about earlier, that's almost completely automation. It's not AI.
Yeah.
You put your little brackets in that fill with the variable stuff, but everything else. We do use AI for a few things. We have a messaging program. What it does is it will read all the correspondence for a certain property going back forever, and it will use that to answer guests if they ask questions.
Thanks for joining us on another REI-NWA podcast. My name is Coley Bailey. I'm a principal broker at Lone Rock Realty, and today we are talking about automation in your real estate investing, and we have a wonderful guest, Garrett Ham.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, man. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You run Weekender Management.
That's right.
And so you do a lot with Airbnbs and short-term rentals and all that kind of stuff. And apparently you got a really high-tech setup doing that.
I don't know about that, but I'll tell you what we do have. Okay. So if we're going to talk about automation, which is a big deal in the short-term rental space, because there are a constant amount of very consistent information that has to go out to guests that maybe isn't as important for tenants.
Yeah.
So every time you have a guest, they need to get the codes to the locks. They need to get check-in instructions. They need to get house rules. And if you start trying to put all that together yourself every time, it's going to consume you. We take in about 4,000 reservations a year.
Wow.
And there'd just be no way we could handle that without automation.
Yeah.
And we started from the beginning when we just had one property.
Okay.
We had started doing it, but as we've gotten bigger, it's gotten a lot more important.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to get into the specific automations, and I want to compare automation versus AI. I want to get into that a little bit. But before we do that, let's rewind the clocks a little bit. Let's learn a little bit about you, who you are, where you're from, how you got to doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from Arkansas. I was born in Blytheville.
Okay.
Well, on Blytheville Air Force Base. My dad was a military officer. And then we ended up back here. So I graduated high school in Cabot. I came up to Northwest Arkansas in 2007 for law school.
Okay.
So I went to law school at the University of Arkansas. When I graduated from there, I went to work at Walmart corporate headquarters in their real estate department. I did that for a little over 3 years. Then I went into private practice. I spent some time as a prosecutor for Benton County. I had joined the Army National Guard by that point. I was a JAG officer in the Army, and then I transferred after a few years to the active duty Air Force. So I spent 4 years in the Air Force, which brought me out of Northwest Arkansas. So I joined the Air Force in 2015, got out of the Air Force in 2019. I went to graduate school at Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut, and then I graduated there in 2022, and then we moved back.
Wow. That needs to be a book.
I was busy.
There's so much to unpack there. Wow, amazing. First of all, thanks for your service multiple times and in multiple forces there. So, wow. And so it's interesting. So you have woven law and real estate into, seems like, all facets of that journey. And so when you landed here, how did Weekender Management come about?
So what had happened when I joined, obviously, like I said, I started out in real estate at Walmart, so I had a lot of commercial and deal-making experience that I obtained at Walmart. And I started investing personally in real estate as I went along, particularly in the military. So when we moved, we kept our house in Bentonville and rented it out, and then when we would go to a duty location, I'd buy a house using a VA loan, and then we'd move, and I would rent it out, and we'd move, and I'd rent it out, and we accumulated our first properties that way. 2021, I was looking. I was at Yale at the time, but I was looking to come home.
Yeah.
After graduation, so I started looking for investment property in Fayetteville. I was pulling equity out of the other homes. I finally had enough to buy an investment property that I wasn't going to live in first.
Yeah.
And when I was doing that, it was extremely difficult. So this was 2021.
Yeah.
So finding a cash flowing property was very hard.
Yeah, prices were jumping up.
Oh, it was
every
crazy.
month they were getting higher.
It's crazy. And I stumbled across, I never thought about short-term rentals. I had stumbled across a property that the owner was using for midterms mostly. and she was able to cash flow on the property. And so I purchased that outside of Fayetteville, and I wasn't here. So I'd look for property managers. I'd always use property managers in the other houses I had, and I could not find anyone who would manage it. There was one or two companies here that were existing that were doing short-term rentals, but they didn't want to manage the property because it was outside the city limits or whatever. So my sister lived in the area, and she helped me manage it while I was, from afar. And then people started asking us for help, and it just kind of turned into a business, kind of an accidental business.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people want to get into the short-term rental game, but they don't necessarily understand it's different. I mean, it's so much different than long-term. Long-term is like the rental is the service, but in the short-term, it's like the experience is the service, and it's it's more hospitality than just real estate as a service in itself.
Yeah, absolutely, and everything has to be done a lot quicker. Yeah. So if someone's at an Airbnb, or if someone's a long-term tenant and there's a maintenance issue, you can usually wait a little while. It's not an emergency.
Right.
The same maintenance issue suddenly becomes an emergency when they're only staying for 2 days.
Yeah.
So everything has to be quicker, and people lock themselves out all the time. There's just a lot of things that are interesting to deal with.
Yeah, and those reviews happen all the time. So you can almost count every one of them. So if you run into a problem, it becomes a bigger problem for your review count. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And reviews are such a important part of this business.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about automation. Things that you have put in place. You can mention specific programs if you want to, things like that, and then we'll just kind of get into how people can utilize these automations, whether it's short term or even long term.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have several programs that we use to kind of help us with this. We use our main property management software is Guesty, which is probably the big player in the market, but they are the priciest. We didn't start out with that. I think we started out with Hostfully or something that was more economical.
Okay.
But as we grew, we needed more features, and Guesty allows automation to set up the specific messages that go out to guests automatically when they book.
Is that mostly email? Is it also text? Like what are those?
Typically, it sends through the PMS or through the OTA. So if it's Airbnb, if they book through Airbnb, it sends an Airbnb message. If they book through VRBO, typically only email if they book directly with us.
Okay.
So that does happen, and so everything is.
So it goes back through that app. And
yes.
They're getting an alert in that app.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
yeah, whatever the app that they use to book, that's the alert that they're given, or that it comes through. There are other pieces with that. So, for example, one of the big things for security is lock codes at all our properties. But we have a system using Guesty has an internal system, but we've used a program called Remote Lock in the past. We prefer Guesty right now because it's all integrated. So each guest is assigned a unique code that's only good during their reservation. So if somebody shows up early, they can't get in. If they try to come back, they can't get in. All that's done automatically.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Really? That's amazing. So what other types of automations might also be helpful even for some of our long-term landlords? Are there any tips or tricks there?
Yeah. So we do a small number of long-term rentals as a service to our clients. We do specialize in short-term, but we use Buildium for our long-term rentals.
Okay.
The automation is less intense, but things like reports, things like allowing tenants when they're there longer to pay online through a portal that Buildium adds.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily call that automation, but it does keep people from having to write a check and drop it off at the office and that whole deal. So
does it come back up every month?
Yeah, that's right. That's automated. Yeah, that's absolutely right. So that, and then we manage a condo association that does the same thing. So the less we have to put our hands on, first off, the better. It saves labor that can be used elsewhere, and then also the less opportunity there is for human error.
Yeah.
I mean, you still have to monitor it because if you program it incorrectly, you get a lot of weird stuff. But.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You gotta work out the bugs for sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about the difference between automation and AI, right? So AI is kind of the buzzword of the last year or two, especially since ChatGPT came out, and there's a lot of different companies that are coming out. That's, oh, we're an AI company, we're AI. And a lot of older, legacy softwares are now like, oh, we do AI too. So there's a lot of things that are out there. But I mean, truthfully, we've had automations for a long time. I mean, I know, on the brokerage side, automated emails going out, automated texts going out, things like that. Those have been around for a long, long time, and it's not necessarily an AI thing.
Yeah, so the automation that I was talking about earlier, that's almost completely automation. It's not AI.
Yeah.
You put your little brackets in that fill with the variable stuff, but everything else is the message that you program. So everyone gets the same message.
It says like, hi, first name.
Yeah.
And then it fills in first name, right?
That kind of thing, yeah.
Yep.
But we do use AI for a few things. We have a messaging program. I know Host AI is one of them, but it's not to use. I think it's, I can't remember, Hospital AI or something.
Okay.
I can't remember what it's called, but it's an AI program, and what it does is it will read all the correspondence for a certain property going back forever, and it'll use that to answer guests if they ask questions. So that will happen. Now, what we end up doing with that, we do have people on staff who do the answers, question and answer. So we typically only have that on during the nighttime.
Yeah.
So that they
so
can
it has a training data set.
Oh yeah.
For that specific property going back a long time.
Absolutely. And so it usually gives pretty good answers. Sometimes the answers are weird.
Yeah.
So
well, it's getting better.
No, absolutely.
It's
but it always includes like we put a disclaimer. It's like, this is an AI. If it's weird, somebody will get to your message, but I hope that this helps. That way they get a response within seconds versus, it may, when they write at 3:00 in the morning, which some people do, they're probably not going to get a response. If they call, they'll get a response, but they're probably not going to get a response until 6 or 7 in the morning.
If somebody called me at 3 a.m., they would not get a response that they got, I promise you.
Well, that's part of the business. So.
Yep. Okay. Well, very interesting. So, how do people find out about some of these different systems, different automations, and maybe even AIs that they can use? I don't know. How do people get into this if they're not currently using something like that?
So if the first step is to get a property management system. So your Guesties, your Hostfullies, your Hospitables are kind of the big players. They have integration partners. I think Guesty and Hostfully I know have a ton. And a lot of the things I found out about were I just went for the integration partners. What softwares have entered into partnerships with Guesty to integrate in the system. And that's where I found.
So they kind of have a library of them in there, so you can look through and see like, well, what does this one do? What does this one do? Right?
Yeah.
You see if it's something that fits with how you'd like to operate.
Yep. So that's what we do. And then the other thing, I mean, once you get into this business is fine you. So you get solicitations all the time with marketing campaigns. Obviously you can't sign up for everyone.
Just click some ads.
Yeah.
And like throw your email address out a couple of places and there you go.
Do it at your own risk, I say.
Well, then you'll get a lot more coming to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, interesting. Well, I think this is going to be a really great landlord lunch coming up. It's going to be November 21st at noon at the Wagon Wheel Cafe in Springdale. So make sure to come out and meet Garrett and talk about automation and get into how it can help you and your investing. As usual, it's $0 at the door if you're an REI-NWA member, $20 if you're not. So you might as well just join for the year and come on back to a bunch of different programs that we're going to be having. But once again, November 21st, 2024, Wagon Wheel Cafe at noon. Come on out to the Landlord Lunch. Happy to see you then. Thanks for joining us on this episode of REI-NWA Podcast. We'll see you on the next one.